last week, if you were here, I sort of took a little break from, we've been in a series in the book of Mark, and we'll get back to that series next week. But last week, I took us on a journey into the story of Jonah, because I had recently been really blown away with the story of Jonah, and started reading books on the story of Jonah, and just like got hyper just focused on Jonah. And so we had a conversation about that, and what that means, and what that means for sort of how we engage in our social political landscape, and how we sort of assess and reassess some of these things. And it was a beautiful conversation. And at the end of the gathering last week, I kind of just said, like, hey, email me what's on your mind. So for those of you who emailed me, thank you. And overwhelmingly, it was a conversation of, okay, yes, all these things, sure, ideologically are true, but what does that mean for actual life? There's all these concepts, there's all these ideas out there, there's all these ways to express things and to explain things, but what does that mean for my relationship with my mom? What does that mean for action I am going to take this year? What does that mean? What does that actually mean? And how do we sort of engage that? And so this morning, I really just wanted to get super practical with some things. I know I'm a person who likes to stay in the clouds a little bit, like ideologically, because I'm like, conceptually, everything makes sense. If you just don't try to really live it out, you know, it actually works out perfectly. And I love that. And so this morning, I want to talk through a framework that is actually the framework that I understood as I rediscovered and re-engaged with the book of Jonah. It's a framework that's also shaped a lot of my experience with faith, and something that I've been overlaying in my experience with politics, as we exist in a season that is just like, I mean, it's wild, right? Not only is this like an intense political time, it's an election year, it's all of these things, but we also have access to the most information we've ever had access to. So not only do we know what's going on here, we know what's going on everywhere, and that's an incredibly overwhelming feeling at times. And so how do I sort of navigate all these things? And I've started to take this framework and overlay it not only to sort of faith and biblical text, politics, and then also onto relationships. And so we'll get back to the book of Mark next week, because Corey will be back and he loves the schedule. But that was my second. I promise he would laugh if he was here. So I wanted to walk us through that and just talk through it, because sometimes I think that there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of different ways that we could sort of get stuck on something. There's overwhelmingly, I think that for a lot of us, and I just mean humans, the temptation to have arrived is so strong and delightful. Like, I would love to just some point arrive, be it like relationally, creatively, politically, religiously, ideologically, and be like, finally, I can rest and stop taking in new information because I have arrived. And the truth is, that's not a real thing. Something my wife and I used to say about our relationship in marriage is we used to say there's no neutral. Like, marriage has no neutral, is what it feels like. You're either moving closer together or you're moving farther apart. There's not a lot of just like non-intention seasons where like there's no intention behind it, but everything's like really good, you know? And so the reality that is just a constant progression. And the beauty of it is that as you go on that progression, things, you know, are awesome. Sometimes. So all that to say, we're going to talk through this framework. We're going to have a conversation, and then we're going to eat some rotisserie chickens back there. Does that sound good? Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is the framework. And Coco, you could just leave that up the whole time if you want. Okay. So imagine, I know this goes 1 through 5, but imagine it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's like in a circle. And I sent that to our graphic design team, but no one sent anything back, so I don't know what's I don't know what's going on there. Just kidding. I wrote this out in a notes app on my phone. Okay, so observing, reflecting, praying, acting, reassessing. And if I was a good evangelical pastor, those would all start with the same letter. they would spell out some sort of acronym, but or par isn't really giving. So the first step in observing is very important. And this is something we are so diligent about at Do a New Abbey. And this is just a step where whatever the experience is, let's say it's scripture, historical context is incredibly important. It's always so important. What is the context of the thing that I'm experiencing? So in the book of Jonah, the context about him being an oppressed person and him being asked to go to Nineveh, which was like, where the Assyrian Empire was, which were the people who were violently oppressing his people, that context is incredibly important as we read the story. Context is everything when we arrive at a place with new information or arrive at any kind of conflict. In a relationship, context is incredibly important. If someone is triggered by something or activated by something I said, there's probably a reason that has something to do with the context of how they grew up, where they came from, all of these things. All the politics, all the policies, all of them have a historical context of how we meet them, and understanding that context is so important. Something I grew up hearing from my dad a lot was you can't understand content without context. Because everything has a context to it, and our ability to grasp and sit with that is going to do very well in how we continue to move forward and address those things. So the first step is observing. So we have to see what is the context, where did this come from, and then reflecting. And the reflection comes in, okay, that's a historical context, but what does that mean for right now? Okay, that's the context, and how does that sit with me in this moment? Something during COVID, my parents got divorced, which was a very wild experience because they were together for 40 years, So at some point you're like, don't you just write it out? Okay, we're doing this. I'm just kidding. Very happy for their journeys. But the context of which they sat down and explained to us, here's why this is happening, made so much sense. I was like, oh, of course. I can look back at the context, and I'm hearing context about your relationship that I didn't understand before, and I'm getting these things, and okay, the context all makes sense. And then when I go to reflecting, but it's still incredibly painful for me right now. The context makes sense. I would make the same decision in your scenario. The context is very helpful, but right now for me, it's painful. And so how do I sit with that juxtaposition of, okay, I understand why what I said was hurtful to you. I understand why you're getting divorced. I understand all of these things. The context is crystal clear. Oh, my experience of it right now is incredibly hurtful. And so I've been on a long journey, in particular with my parents and my family, to say conversations that sound like, I'm really happy for you, but that happiness is complicated for me. And I think that's just something I need to sit with. Sometimes my personality type, as an Enneagram type 7, if you're familiar with that, I like to resolve things very quickly. So sometimes if I have context and it makes sense, I'll be like, well, then I can't be sad about it because it makes sense to me in my head, right? But then when I sit time and I actually reflect on it, it is very hurtful to me. And so as we experience information in context, whether it be huge political ideas or whether it be relationship dynamics or things with our family, we have to be able to reflect on what does that mean for me now and be honest about how that sits. And third is prayer. And this is another one I like to skip because prayer is confusing to me, especially over the last many years of my faith changing shape. What does prayer mean? Am I asking for something specific, or what happens if I don't get it? Does that mean that I'm not supposed to ask for something? Am I just accepting the way things are and saying, thank you for giving me this opportunity to be mad, which doesn't feel genuine? What even is it? And so as I've sat with things recently and as I've worked through this framework or try to have bigger ideas, I've started to understand prayer as a reminder of what it means to breathe, right? The most simple prayer I can think of is breath. And there is a practice called breath prayer, but it's this reminder that every moment that our lungs fill with air, they're just to be emptied again, right? That is peaks and valleys, and that God is not something that we need to invite into something, but that God is everywhere and always. And if we can attach ourselves to that reality, then when I pray now, I just remind myself that in the peaks and the valleys and every single moment, God is present. And I don't even always know what that means. But I know that when I try to distance my life and the things I'm going through and my relationships and my creativity and my politics, when I try to distance it from the reality that God is present in everything and everywhere and always, it's harder. It's not good. And so prayer, to me, has become a wild practice of saying, okay, I'm sitting with context and reflecting, and I'm sitting with things that don't make sense, and I would just like to acknowledge that you're sitting here with me too. And we have people in this community, and I have a lot of people in my life who are far more developed in their experience of prayer, and I love that about New Abbey, right? Because we have people who just have a different experience and are so just in tune in a specific way that they pray, that I'm really grateful for their influence in this community. But prayer and inviting God into this reality and reminding ourselves that God is everywhere and always is an incredibly important part of how we process information in the world. And then acting. Something that is, we used to say a lot at New Abbey is language, action, rhythm. If you've been at New Abbey for 8+ years, you probably heard that. So language, when we say like, hey, I'm an anti-racist, you're like, nice. What does that mean? And how does that play out in your life? And so a lot of us sometimes get stuck on this language moment where we say, I am this, or I believe this, and that is the perfect first step. But if it doesn't turn into action, then it will never turn into a rhythm. And rhythm is always what we're seeking for when it comes to action, right? If I say, hey, I'm a person who cares about this, who cares about the environment. I'm an environmentalist. I'm a climate warrior. I don't know the terminology. I love the planet. Okay, I say that, then I'm like, okay, well, what's the one thing I could do? Okay, I'm composting. Okay, well, I tried composting. Well, I got a compost bin, and then I unpacked it. And then now it's a rhythm of my life where I'm like, okay, every month we put worms in this nasty thing and we turn it around. Because what we're always going for is that our action becomes a rhythm. Our action can never be words, and our action usually isn't one time. Our actions have to become rhythm, and that's when they really sink into our lives and we understand these things in a different way. So we have to act. And then number 5, and I think one of the most important things that we have to do and constantly be in the business of is reassessing. This is where the sneaky trick comes in, where we feel like we might be able to have arrived. Okay, we have all the right historical context. We've reflected in all the right ways. We prayed to the exact right God in the exact right way. We've taken the exact right action, and now we are done. In the 1990s, a psychologist by the name of Ari Kruglansky coined this term cognitive closure. And it's the point at which your brain stops taking in new information. You've decided you have all the right information to make a decision. In some ways, that's super helpful because all we do all day is make decisions. You stand on the street and you look left and right, and at some point you have to decide, I'm not in danger, I'm going to cross the street, right? You get in your car, you decide, I'm turning, whatever. But the danger in that is that sometimes we get so comfortable that we convince ourselves we don't need to take in any new information. So, okay, finally, I'm at New Abbey. I'm at the exact right kind of church. I don't need any more information about what's going on in the world. I don't need to read any more theology books. I finally made it to the kind of church. Okay, finally, I have the right politics. I don't need to take in any information because I know the exact right people I'm going to vote for. Okay, finally, I'm in the exact right relationship, and I don't need to change anything. I don't need to work on myself anymore. Okay, finally, I have the exact right kind of healing. I got the right kind of therapist. I did the right kind of trauma work, and I'm done, right? And the reality is that the arriving was never the goal, and it's not even a realistic thing that we experience. But that we are in a constant, that's why the picture of this is a circle. Just picture it in your minds on your own. Yeah, we'll get that to you sometime. Is so important. Because we have to be open to new information. We have to be open to new ways of doing relationships. So many emails that I got from you all that just tore me apart were about family members. I think I only got one email that wasn't about a direct relationship with a family member. Okay, yes, I don't want to be on my horse, but what do I do about my mom who very much believes this? What do I do with my aunt who believes this? What do I do with my sister who believes this? How do I do with the relationship with my cousin? And the reality is that we have to be open to new information constantly and reassess, was that the right action? Is this the right context? Am I reflecting the right things? Can I pray more? And how do I stay in this thing? I think we talk about boundaries a lot at New Abbey and how they are incredibly important, and they're some of the most important work we can do is to understand how to set and hold a boundary, and I would go further to say, and reassess. Sometimes boundaries, action, and things we do, everything gets to be up on the chopping block. And we have to be in the business of creating a rhythm of reassessing to say, yes, that still makes the most sense for me. Yes, with all the new information I have, that still makes sense. No, it needs to be a stronger boundary. Okay, I think I'm open to a conversation. Okay, I'm actually going to go no contact. Whatever it is, there's no right answer on what the action is, but our ability to stay in the game and constantly reassess, our ability to say like, hey, I think I'm going to ask my dad if he's going to come to LA and I'm going to get all the siblings together because I'm just going to do it, right? And I'm going to come to that table. There are so many things happening in our world every single day, and I think sometimes, okay, let me use this example. In 2020, I don't know if you guys remember. Yeah, thank you for that one sad laugh. I just was having a conversation with a friend, and in 2020, we had so many things going on. And in this country, we were experiencing a summer of revolution. After the murder of George Floyd, it was all hands on deck towards anti-racism. And as someone who has worked in the DEI space, anti-racism trainings and workshops and courses, I started a Center for Racial Reconciliation, have been in this work. I look back at the action, some of the action I took in 2020, and I would absolutely not do that again. Because I had to be open to reassessing. That's where I was at the time with the context and all of those things. But I have to reassess and say, was that the right action to take? I'm going to, now at this point, I wouldn't do that the same way. I remember just demanding so much. I remember messaging my chiropractor and being like, I need to know where you stand on Black Lives Matter. And he was like, you know, it's kind of a lot to take in and process. I was like, no, it's not, Dr. Ben. And if you're not with me, you're against me. Because, sweet Dr. Ben, I still go to him. And I don't know exactly where he stands. He never posted on social media. But I don't know that that was an appropriate thing for me to ask of Dr. Ben in that moment. And those are the things where sometimes when we dig our heels into the sand and we pick a position and we say, okay, well, I need to know where you stand, or this. Like, I fully backtracked when he was like, I don't know, I just have a lot to figure out. I was like, well, you still are the best chiropractor I've been to, so I'm going to go ahead and backtrack on what I said. I'm still going to regularly see you. Yeah, did I say I'm leaving the country if Trump got elected in 2016? Yeah. And when he did, still here. Because we have to be able to sit and to say, was that action, that all those things, I took in the context, I took in the information, I did these things, and then I acted, and then I need to be able to go back and reassess and say, was that the right action? Do I still feel comfortable with that action? Is that still the action that I want to take? As I go back through the thing again, will I arrive at the same action? Will it be a little different? Would I have that conversation in a different way? Can I show up with more empathy? Do I need to show up with less empathy? Do I need to be more assertive? Do I need to be less assertive? Do I need to DM my chiropractor? Do I need to not DM my chiropractor, right? All of these things. And that is one of the most important steps, I think, in this framework and in our lives that we can take for relationships. There is no easy answer, and that is very unfortunate. I always wish that there was an equation for family members, like if they're this nice, but then they're this racist, you could still talk to them, but only on holidays. And if they're this kind, but this homophobic, then you can talk to them only on, not during June, but during the rest of the month, right? There's, like, we could turn to some kind of algebra book and put in, like, here's my issue with my family member, what's the answer? And that doesn't exist, unfortunately. But what we do have the opportunity to do is to say, even if we've dug our heels in the sand, even if we've drawn a line, even if we have DM'd them, even if we have yelled at them at Thanksgiving, even if we have told them that, I don't know, we've all said some things. We don't need to get specific. But no matter where we've gone, I think just reminding ourselves that it is always okay to change your mind, and the reassessment is one of the most important parts of the thing. And I'm hesitant to give examples, because for some of you that may be like, I've been way too gracious, and I put myself in harmful positions, and the way I need to reassess is I need stronger boundaries. Absolutely. Some of y'all need to reassess and loosen the reins. Some of y'all might reassess and end up at the same action. I literally don't know. But in so many of your messages, feeling the sense that you had drawn a line in the sand and now felt trapped was kind of heartbreaking. And so this morning, I just want to remind us all, we all have the ability to change our minds. So we've taken action and we look back and we want to change our minds. I have a friend who is a friend who voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And he started coming to Abbey in 2017, and we became friends. And he was really sad about that he did that. And I said, guess what? Good news. There's another election coming up. And you can change your mind. You can have new information. You can reflect on it. You can work it through your life. And you can act accordingly. Because at the end of the day, this is what we want for the people in our lives. And this is what we need to do for ourselves as well. We need to experience new information. And we can act in a different way. None of us are trapped in the reality that we have created for ourselves. None of us are even trapped in all the things that we have said. Do you know how many things I've said that I would never say again? Okay, not going to say them now. But it's a lot. Because I get to do that. We get to do that. And so if we take anything from this framework and this experience and this morning, I want it to be that. I know so many of us are just feeling so freaking heavy and bogged down by not only our social political climate, but what it's doing to our real lived relationships, because that's ultimately what's going to impact us the most. And so whatever the case may be, whatever the equation and how it works out, I have a mom and she's kind of toxic, but she's also really nice, but it's free childcare, but she tells my kid about Jesus. What, you know what I mean? I don't know, right? I just was talking to a good friend of mine the other day. And speaking of $20,000 a year preschool, childcare, by the way, I don't know if you know this. Everyone here probably does but me. It's very expensive. And so his mom works at a Christian school. And so he was really at this dilemma, like, my kids could go to preschool for free, but they are going to learn some things. So, like, is it worth it for the money? But I'll tell them when they get home that wasn't the... And we're really sitting with this because he's really stuck on this dilemma. Like, what do I do? These are my options. And I know so many of us have those in our life, whatever they are, these relationships where you're like, I can still comfortably be in this relationship with this person, but I hope no one online ever finds out. Or, I could still go to this Thanksgiving dinner, but we're just going to keep it surface level. Is that bad? Or is that like an okay thing to do as a family member? Oh, okay, I could do all of these things. And I just want to remind us, we can reassess that at any time. Every time we experience new information, we can reassess the action in our life. We are not stuck. Maybe some of you need to get more unstuck, I don't know. But the reality is I just want to remind us this morning that we can constantly evolve. And if you are in a room like New Abbey, it means that you have taken the faith that you probably grew up with and evolved and changed. And guess what? That's not done. You can take that same framework, that same experience, and that can happen in every area of your life. And it should. We should never be standing still, having arrived fully at fill-in-the-blank area of our lives. It's so beautiful to me and redemptive that I get to be a part of reclaiming these stories from my childhood in a different way. I'm so obsessed with the story of Jonah, and I don't even know why. I'm like, my wife is like, another Jonah book? I'm like, I don't know. I just keep ordering them on Amazon. They're so good. And it's such a special thing because I was told something about this story, and I believed something about this story. And then the context and the reflecting and the prayer and sitting with God and reimagining and then reassessing has opened up the story to be one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. I'm really pitching for a Jonah series to Corey, so we'll see if we land on it. You're going to get so much Jonah. But it's just so beautiful and it's so magical. I remember the first time that I was introduced to the idea that maybe Jesus didn't suffer on the cross for us, but that Jesus suffered with us. And how would that change everything? Oh, that context and sitting with that, what that meant for me in my real life and sitting with God with that and understanding that. And how would that change the way I acted in the world? And then how do I constantly reassess what that means for me? This is a beautiful thing that we have all been doing in this space for a long time. And this is just a reminder this morning that we get to do that in every area of our lives. I can't tell you whether or not you should talk to your mom. I can't tell you what to do with your Trumpy cousin. I can't tell you whether or not you should let your Trumpy cousins' kids that are unvaccinated come to your thing. These are real things that we're all just struggling with, and I don't have those answers. But what I do know is that we get to constantly reassess the framework every time we take in new information and have conversations that say, is this the right action? Maybe it was the action I took yesterday. Maybe it was the action I took this morning. But I think I need to reassess, and I would do new action today. And not just more open, because they get to participate in that same framework as well. And we can be constantly open to change instead of digging our heels in the sand and saying, well, Dr. Ben, you should have posted a black square when I asked you. Which, what was that even going to do? But I was committed. So you're going to grab the same 3 or 4 people around you and ask this question. What step do you need to focus on right now?